In 1919, a Canadian teenager with a 6th grade education arrived by train into Los Angeles. Within a decade, he had transformed himself into a world-renowned occult scholar, with many celebrities as his disciples. His name was Manly Palmer Hall. Time to meet the Master of Mysteries here on Things Visible and Invisible. Louis Sahagun recently retired as a staff writer at the Los Angeles Times. He covered everything from religion, culture and the environment to crime and politics. He was on the team of LA Times writers that won the Pulitzer Prize and was again on the team that was a finalist for the same prize in 2015. And he joins me down the line from his home in California. Louis, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Louis, let's begin at the beginning. You have unearthed a very strange tale, the Master of Mysteries. Most people will not know anything about the protagonist of your book. So let's start in Canada.
Manly Palmer Hall was an American mystic whose career spanned 70 years. And in that time, he wrote more than 200 books, gave 8,000 lectures, most of them from a throne-like chair on a stage. No notes, no water to clear his throat. And he would lecture for 90 minutes, as if reading a scroll, unfurling over the heads of his audience about ancient religious teachings, rituals, allegories, and he was absolutely mesmerizing. What no one knew is that as he's doing this and becoming incredibly influential in politics and entertainment industry, presidents had his books on their shelves, actors, went to him, politicians used him as a confidant. What no one knew is that he had a 6th grade education and that he was absolutely self-taught and had been abandoned by his father and mother at birth. And so this man who, and I knew none of this until I got a strange phone call from a tipster one hot summer night in 1990 to say, LA Times, you better get an obituary ready. The greatest philosopher of all time has died. Until that night, I knew none of this. But after the call, I went to our archives at the LA Times because I told my editor that night, hey, we've got this influential LA fellow who died. This guy says we should have an obituary prepared. So I went into the archive and lo and behold, I saw hundreds of news articles published in the LA Times from the 20s all the way to the 80s. Well, most of them were between the 20s and the 50s about this man and what he had to say about the Japan invading, Pearl Harbor and, the start of the World War II and in the Pacific, virtually everything. And so I only had room for 10 paragraphs for the obit. I did that, but then I later learned that police believe he was murdered. He did not die of natural causes, and the murder was horrific. So I dove into his life and times with both feet.
Well, that's a wonderful sort of preamble, if I may say, Louis. In the best Hollywood tradition, I almost feel like we're watching a film where an experienced journalist suddenly comes across a sort of mysterious character. Unfortunately today, though, if you were to stop the average person on the street in United States or in Europe and ask them about Manly Hall, they would have no idea who you're talking about, which is also part of the kind of myth around this man. That why did he disappear? Why did he why was he so famous? And then he came from obscurity, became famous, and then retreated to obscurity, it seems. So let's begin at the beginning. Talk to me a little bit about where he came from, his early days, what we know of it anyway.
Yes. Manly Hall was born on March 18, 1901 in a hospital in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada. His father, immediately after he was born, his father, a dentist, abandoned the family. His mother gave the baby to her mother, his grandmother, and said, "You take it." And she went to start a career as a chiropractor in the Alaskan goldfields. Manly was raised by his peripatetic grandmother, and all the way until he was 18 years old. And during that time, oddly enough, he got to meet Houdini, the magician, the stage magician in New York, and they argued over the validity of the Indian rope trick and what have you. Try to imagine. So when his grandmother died, this boy who had a sixth grade education and no one to turn to jumped on a train and headed to Southern California to join his mother, reunite. His mother lived in Santa Monica, California at the time. And Southern California was a shining, regarded as almost a new Canaan in the United States. It was a kind of a promised land. There were plane builders, ship builders. The Hollywood entertainment industry was blossoming. Oil derricks everywhere you look. So this place was exploding in a way all its own. Hall is this big lug of a kid with an uncertain future, and he goes for a walk one day on the Santa Monica Pier. And during that walk, he looks in a window of a phrenology shop. This was a shop run by a Civil War era doctor metaphysician who, for a fee, would read the bumps on your head that tell you about your personality, your fate, your cycles of life. Paul goes in there and meets this tiny little doctor with long blonde hair and character, and they become best friends. It's Hall's best friend and only friend. Try to imagine Hall's over 6 feet tall, shaped like an avocado. He's already immense, and this little tiny doctor, metaphysical doctor. The doctor starts telling him about the esoteric notions of ancient Babylonians, Egyptians, Madame Blavatsky and her great white brotherhood in the Himalayan mountaintops, and more. Paracelsus, who became one of Hall's, unfortunately, one of his, somebody that he followed maybe a little too literally, as maybe we'll get to that later. So the old man says to him one day, "Kid, you really picked this up fast. You're a fast learner. I give lectures on all this stuff on a bank down the street. Why don't you try it out? I'll take you there. You give a lecture. I think you're ready." So Hall and Sydney Brownson go to that place above a bank, a room, and there's like just a handful of old men and women in there. That's the audience. And Hall gave his very first lecture, and it was on reincarnation. They earned $1.65 in donations, and they split it later. They celebrated over bowls of ice cream. Next thing you know, Hall it becomes, everyone wants to hear this kid. He's amazing. He's mesmerizing. Already, he had a perfect memory, which made people think. It created the illusion almost that he was channeling this information from the great beyond.
Well, before we go further, Lewis, I'm intrigued to know a little bit about Hall, because he's associated with sort of Eastern, occult, theosophy, sort of exotic religious varieties that were swirling around Southern California at the time. But what was his actual ethnicity and religious background? I mean, did he have any kind of background in that, or was this completely something that he stumbled upon when he arrived in Los Angeles?
That is a really good question. And the answer is this: yes, he did have an inkling. When he reunited with his mother, he discovered that, oh, my mother is a Rosicrucian. She was a congregant of a Rosicrucian fellowship in Oceanside to the south of LA, California. And that's a really interesting, I came to believe, an interesting aspect of his life, because he's soaking all this up at Brownson's office, and he's reading on his own, and he's got this photographic memory. And now he could turn to the mother who had abandoned him and say, Mommy, do you love me now? Look what I know. I know all about these things that you're interested in, even maybe more than you and the people that are teaching you. Look at me. I'm a rising star in your spiritual milieu.
Wow.
And I think that was a driving force.
But I mean, in a sense, Lewis, I mean, he arrived in Los Angeles. You painted the picture. It was thriving on many different fronts, economically, but also the entertainment, the burgeoning Hollywood industry was just starting. I mean, was it just a matter of sort of accident, if we can put it like that, that he ended up moving into the sphere of exotic religiosity, as opposed to maybe walking into a studio in Hollywood and becoming a great director or a great writer or even maybe a great actor?
And that's also a great question. And it's quite remarkable. I have to hand it to him. I mean, we should all be so lucky. So he's in his late teens or 20, and he finds himself a congregant at one of many churches in LA at that time that were set up for basically new arrivals who were religious free thinkers, And so Manley is a congregant. Next thing you know, the pastor at this church, he leaves, and they turn to the kid who seems to know so much about so many things, and they say, "How would you like to be pastor of the church?" He's only 20 years old. So next thing you know, the congregants in turn are saying, "Young man, who is Madame Blavatsky?" Or, "Young man, could you please tell us about astrology and how I could incorporate it in my life, maybe to get a better job?" Manley then would hole up in the LA library at the time and read everything, come back the next Sunday and say on the throne, "Well, folks, today we're going to talk about how astrology can improve your life." Okay, so he's answering the questions. All right. He also had this habit, among other things, when he would meet, two congregants in that church were heiresses of one of California's wealthiest oil families, Carolyn Lloyd and her daughter Estelle. And one day, while this pastor, the new kid in charge, after his sermon, she went up to him and said, "Young man, you will never have to worry about money as long as you live." And she wrote him in to get a cut of her royalties for his whole life. And it paid for trips around the world and a fabulous library. Okay, he had a habit also of introducing himself this way: "I think I knew you in a past life."
Very good.
And people would say, "What? Are you crazy?" "No, no, no. I think I knew you." "Well, when? What are you talking about?" "Well, it was at Plato's, one of his lectures in the olive groves in ancient, Greece." "What? Yeah, you were a student there." Next thing you know, he's got them in the palm of his.
Totally.
He had a lot of tricks like that. And so next thing you know, his best friends are actress Anna May Wong, Bela Lugosi, who
Yes.
he famed through his performance as Count Dracula in the 1932 or 33 movie, or 1938 movie.
31 actually, but anyway.
Yeah. Oh, and so next thing you know, Warner Brothers. And now he's influential. Everyone knows him. Why do they know him? Why do they want to know him? Because Manley knows things no one else does, he says. He knows secrets.
Well,
Everyone wants to get close to him to get an edge on the competition.
well, just before we get into that, because this is absolutely fascinating, Lewis, I want to just paint a little bit of a picture, though, because Southern California at this time, Los Angeles in particular, seemed to be a magnet for kind of new age, what we would term new age today, I guess, theosophy. Every single guru going seemed to be heading to Los Angeles and seemed to not only find a reception, but find similar people to Manly Hall, that they were finding people who were able to fund them and propagate their message, etc., etc. Why do you think that was? What was in the air in Southern California at the time that made it so susceptible to these new religions, these exotic religions? Some would say bordering on sort of quackery, charlatans. Everybody was heading to LA. What was going on, Lewis?
One of the things I learned is that Manly Hall, when he came to California, it was the right time for someone like him because the area was filling up with these free thinking types, Masons, Rosicrucians, Theosophists, and all manner of religious seekers in between. The other thing is that as I look out my window right now, it is reaching roughly 80 degrees and clear skies. We don't have weather in California. It's always like this. And we also had almost infinite flatlands, developable flatlands riven with streams and foliage, and it was a paradise. And no snow, no tornadoes, no hurricanes. And there was a sense that this was the tip of this spear of a new, of the future of the nation itself, if not humanity. Yeah. And so these people were setting up shop. This kid, though, he was a teenager, and he's immense, mesmerizing, these, hypnotic blue eyes. And he was a walking encyclopedia on things esoteric of all manner. And then he also would talk about what's to come, when people he was set himself apart as a kind of a kind of a Don Quixote, kind of a little crazy, a little mad, and inviting people, though, to join him on a journey along a path to enlightenment and supernatural powers. Yes, he was. Manly Hall became a go-to guru of sorts for up-and-comers in the entertainment industry and business and politics in particular. Los Angeles Mayor Sam Yorty had been a student, for example, of Manly Hall's secretly since 1927. By the way, Sam Yorty was one of the most corrupt and racist mayors in LA history. Also, by the way, Osama bin Laden had Manly's big book, Secret Teachings of All Ages, on his shelves when the Americans broke in and confiscated all his belongings. But going back, so here's what I learned. So Manly Hall was a leader in this exploding kind of, influential, esotericism that was sweeping the area during the formative years of Los Angeles and California. And so it's kind of, I saw through Manly's life, I could tell a story about the history, the metaphysical history of California that few people are aware of. It could be said, honestly, that mystics built Los Angeles. And that's in part because Manly Hall was counseling people in powerful positions. One of them was California Goodwin Knight, just for example, in the 1950s. Now, I discovered that California Governor Goodwin Knight, by the way, all of these people are hyper conservative philosophically and politically. Hall was a gung ho patriot because he believed that America was the tip of the spear of human evolution, like many of them did. By the way, white America, they believed. So anyway, Goodwin Knight is going to Hall for counseling at a time when Goodwin Knight is dispensing hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayers' money to build, the world's, these great freeway systems and the first large public school systems in California. Manly Hall was the guy behind the guy behind the guy when all this is going on. Okay, but there was a dark side, and if you don't mind, I just think it accompanied all this, and it's just hard to wrap your mind around. So for all the talk of enlightenment and all of that, Hall and his ilk, including David Starr Jordan, the first president of Stanford University, were promoters of eugenics and birth control as a way of expanding the number of reducing, mentally and physically unfit people, they believed. Anti-Semitism was a powerful thread through all of their notions. And this is really, really unfortunate because these ideas fueled some of the largest, some of the most horrific movements in modern history, including Nazism and the Holocaust. And even later, they're still promoting these ideas when Martin Luther King is marching for civil rights, when Black and Latino and people of color are getting having attack dogs put on them, going to jail for no reason. You get the picture.
I do.
And it's one of the reasons I believe that this movement or that stage of esotericism flamed out eventually after the 50s and 60s.
Yes, I mean it was part of a number of, to put it like, faddish things such as eugenics, utopian ideas of one sort or another that were in the atmosphere at the time. But is what you're saying, Lewis, really that in a way Manly Hall was a kind of hobby for the wealthy Los Angeles set, that he was a kind of religious guru. It was kind of like the feel-good guru for wealthy people in that part of the United States. Is that too simplistic?
No, I think you're absolutely right. He had a secret life. He had Aleister Crowley, who, the damn near, satanic, kind of mirror opposite of Hall in the area at the time. He had Aleister Crowley's books in his walk-in vault. And Manly Hall even had, I discovered, he had one of Aleister Crowley's rated X poem. He had it, in his drawer. And it was always there. And I found a fellow who once asked Manly, why do you have that thing in there, Manly? And essentially, in his time, it was the equivalent of having a Playboy magazine stashed in the drawer, somewhere. But Manly had this poem by Aleister Crowley. So while he was telling certain people, you stay away from such things, He was also dangling the carrot of such things as needed, depending on his audience. He told people what they wanted to hear. One example, just one of many, is he would lecture on leprechauns. Okay, so here is the history of the lore and the myth of leprechauns. A day, ladies and gentlemen. And then the conclusion would be that they were part of a family of spirits and fairies that were actually visible to the most advanced adepts, not just anybody. And so if you could befriend them, you would have this army of invisible spirits at your back. The problem with that, and this really happened, one day a woman barged into his office in Los Feliz section of Los Angeles and begging to see Mr. Hall. I have something very important to tell him. He'll want to know. The secretary who was there told me, I told her, no, Mr. Hall is busy. No, this is important. He'll want to know this. He needs to know this. So secretary gets up, goes in there, Mr. Hall, there's a woman, you've got to go and talk to her, deal with this. So Hall gets up, shuffles out. She tells him, Mr. Hall, I was at your lecture about leprechauns. And I just have to tell you that after your lecture, I went to Griffith Park in Los Angeles and I found a leprechaun in one of the oak trees. And so I guess makes me an advanced adept.
Well, I mean,
Hall, she left, and the secretary told me that Hall looked up, rolled his eyes up to the ceiling, threw out his hands and said, "Why do I get all the nuts?"
But
he did it. It was his fault.
Well, Lewis, the picture you're painting, though, is very much a Californian idea, but also maybe an American type, if I can put it like that, which is somebody who's able to incorporate religious ideas. Sometimes they're from Christianity, sometimes they're an esoteric mixed bag of various things. But what they really have is a kind of charismatic personality and also a certain psychological bag of tricks that they deploy to their audience. I mean, there's nothing new in this. I mean, he's also emerging at a time when Madison Avenue, the ideas of Bernays, etc., were very much coming to the fore. The use of Freudian psychology to influence how to sell to the masses. Do you think that Manly Hall was really just part of that? That he was kind of just to put it crudely, just another huckster that was selling to the masses whatever he could sell, telling them whatever they wanted to hear, as long as they were paying?
Actually, another major aspect of Hall's life and times that separates him from all the rest was a book that he put together, a compendium of ancient religious notions and rituals and the secrets embedded in their ancient writings. It is called The Secret Teachings of All Ages. It is an immense, oversized, very impressive book, kind of spooky. You go through it. People thought, now this book was published in 1928. He was 28 years old. It remains probably the best introduction to esoteric notions to this day. It's still the best gateway to those things. People thought, how could a 28-year-old put this together? How could this be? So Hall had this book, which has sold over 1 million copies, by the way, by now, way more, around the world. So Hall had this book, and those others who were dishing out similar notions of positive thinking or whatever, they didn't have this kind of gravitas of, he was a good writer. He had this remarkable compendium, survey work. The problem with that is that it came out, that book, it came out before the Amazon had been explored, before the Congo had been explored, before the atom was split. You see, and so after the 40s, Hall, up until the late 40s and 50s, Hall was giving lectures. Try to imagine, sixth grade education, self-taught, giving lectures at UCLA, University of California, and LA, and elsewhere, as a legit scholar. But by the late 40s and 50s, real scholars, PhDs, were waving at the end of his lecture, Mr. Hall, where did you get that information? Because I have a PhD in that very subject, and I've never heard a single thing about what you're telling us. So in other words, he began to, by this time, people weren't throwing their trust around like confetti anymore in California or America. And so Hall began to embody the flaws of amateur scholarship, and it stuck out like 3D. So he retreated to his headquarters in LA, but he still had this immense, number of followers and people donating gold Krugerrand, gold bars, diamonds, ancient, relics, all stashed in that walk-in vault. This became a magnet for a new type of follower, and these were crooks who heard from Manly's crazy wife, Marie. Talk about a wild card. And Marie would tell anybody who would listen, my Manly has $350 million worth of gold and diamonds in the walk-in vault. Yes, he does. She would tell anybody. And one of the people who got wind of that was Dan Fritz, a bank teller who woke up one morning believing he had the powers to heal and to create curative compounds to treat cancer and what have you. Dan Fritz gets wind of this. He immediately involves himself with Manly and Marie. Next, as a caretaker, Manly's getting old now. He's huge. He's sickly. Manly Hall, who lectured on the metaphysical benefits of proper diet, for example, well, he couldn't keep his hands off chocolate cake. And so, by this, he is just enormous. So Dan Fritz comes in with his son and two young women who were assistants. And he said, Manly, I am going to revive your health. And Marie, you say that you know where the keys to world peace were hidden, so you and only you could find them. Marie, I'm going to teach you how to use a computer, and you can get your message out to the world while I'm reviving your husband's health. That happened. Next thing you know, he gets power of attorney for the house. Next thing you know, he's installing a hot tub where the young women are helping Manly into the hot tub and then later massaging his legs with warm, fragrant, oils. Try to imagine. His son David is using Manly's credit cards to buy women's lingerie. Yes. And Dan Fritz borrowed a couple $100,000 to build, are you sitting down? The water angel. It was a gourd with a tube sticking out to administer enemas to purify the human body that Dan Fritz said another fellow had discovered in the secret archives of the Vatican. And he was going to mass produce this thing. In fact, he wrote a book that first page or two has Jesus Christ saying, no man enters the kingdom of my Father without first having an enema treatment with the water angels. Yes. So he borrows hundreds of thousands of dollars and he starts building these things. He hooks one up in the bathroom in Manly's house. Next thing you know, he's administering them several times a week. I interviewed Manly's family doctor. His family doctor told me, he said, I told Manly, hey, you got to quit doing that. It's upsetting your electrolytes. You're going to get a heart attack. Yeah. But he kept on. And Marie didn't care because she's learning how to use a computer to get the keys to world peace out to the world.
Lewis, I mean, unfortunately, the clock has beaten us on this. But this is, I mean, it's so, I mean, I mean, the question I suppose going through my mind, has anybody approached you to make a film of this? Because this is not only, it's not...
One fellow did, but I just have to, and I'll be as brief as possible. It's all in the book in sordid detail, but this has to be, the dark side, the foolish side of metaphysics.
Yes.
Took Manly's life at the end of his life. Here's how. Manly and Dan Fritz were big fans of the Swiss metaphysician Paracelsus. Paracelsus believed in the curative powers of urine and also in the ability of ants, the insects, to carry off negative vibes of human beings like pack mules. All right. So when the body pickup team came to pick up Manly's body after death was reported, and after I started putting his obit together, I didn't know that when they went into his home, his face they couldn't see his face, it was covered with ants. Police detectives told me that what they believe happened is that Dan Fritz murdered Hall. 6 days earlier, Hall had signed away all his property, everything in the Walk-in Vault, to Dan Fritz and more. So Hall dies. The body pickup team goes in. They can't see his face. They've never seen anything like it. Ants are streaming out of his ears, nose, and mouth. Police believe that after Hall died, Fritz and his son took the body out to the garden where there were ants, stuffed his orifices with molasses, and rolled him around in the ground so the ants would go in there. Hall and Fritz had been seen just a few months earlier together urinating on the eastern side of a tree at daybreak in Manly's yard, so that ants could lap it up and take the negative vibes away. They were applying Paracelsian notions to their real life. This is so...
Yeah. It's
just so... It's heartbreaking.
It is, but in some ways, Lewis, it's also so utterly predictable. These self-appointed gurus, I'm afraid they have feet of clay, inevitably, and these sorts of once money and fame comes into the picture, then all bets are off. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time together, Lewis. It's been absolutely fascinating. Tell people where they can find out more about you, but also where they can pick up a copy of your biography of Manly Hall.
Well, actually, I'm all over the internet. If you just type in my name and hit enter, you can find the book at libraries, fine booksellers, and internet booksellers worldwide, as well as from the publisher, feralhouse.com.
Lewis, thank you so much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.